I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to the final episode of the 9th season of Old's Oscar Countdown. Here we are, my final predictions for the 2025 Oscars. If you're new to the channel, what we've been doing all the way back since October is every single week, sometimes multiple times a week, talking about the Oscars, predicting what's going to get nominated, and then predicting ultimately what's going to win. This is the 9th time we're actually doing this on YouTube, so we have lots of experience. We're usually pretty good at these things, and you can check out my past predictions to see how well I actually did. But we've been doing a lot of work for this, and this video is just going to help maybe you give your own predictions, to hear some of my thoughts and some of my analysis as to why I went with one movie over another. As always, if you want to see my just plain predictions, check the timestamps in the description below. And then if you want to jump around to hear a certain category, my thoughts on a certain category, or maybe a couple days, before the actual ceremony, you want to hear, oh, what did Connor think about this one category? Come back to the video, check out the description, and you can jump around to hear my thoughts. This has been the craziest Oscar year since I've really been covering this channel now. Even more than, 2016 when I started with the Moonlight Surprise, or the 2019 Parasite Surprise. In terms of trying to predict some of these major categories, picture, acting, director, we've never had it this unsure, and I've never been this unconfident kind of in my predictions. That being said, I still will kind of tell you why I went with one prediction over another, but it's been a really fun year, and I hope you guys have enjoyed. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, so please feel free to comment below and give your own predictions and have a little bit of debate in the comments down below. I love hearing your guys' thoughts and analysis. We've got a great community here on Old's Oscar Countdown. But without further ado, let's jump into things. Starting off with the big one, Best Picture. And my prediction, I think it's going to go to Anora. This was tough after Conclave won at SAG, but ultimately I considered the factor that Anora has multiple paths to win Best Picture, whereas Conclave really only has one, and let me explain that. So when I talk about paths, I try to map out the Oscars. Okay, if this person is going to win in this category, that means this person is going to win in that category, which means it should win Best Picture, or this movie should or shouldn't win. And Conclave, I think, is going to win Best Adapted Screenplay. It's likely to win editing, and that's it. So if its path really is a screenplay, editing, picture, best picture path, or it's a screenplay, best picture path, and we've seen very few movies win only Best Picture and then one other Oscar, or Best Picture and then two other Oscars. For the most part, most Oscar movies pick up a screenplay prize or an acting prize or a directing prize, which Anora has opportunities in all three of those categories. There's a scenario where Anora wins screenplay and picture, yes. There's also a scenario where it wins picture, director, screenplay, or maybe it even wins director, actress, picture. There are a bunch of different opportunities for Anora to win. And the reason why I mentioned those categories is because 7 out of the last 10 Best Picture winners also won a screenplay prize. 4 of the last 5 Best Picture winners also won for Best Director, and 5 out of the last 10 Best Picture winners also had an acting prize win go along with it. So if Conclave, let's say, were to win, it would have to essentially buck the trend of most recently director correlation, and also about half the time an acting win as well goes with the Best Picture win. Whereas something like Anora, even if Mikey Madison doesn't win, but it wins in screenplay and director, that would be consistent with recent winners. And then if it does win, let's say Mikey Madison for actress, well then also you have a kind of the trifecta of most Best Picture winners have an acting win, a screenplay win, or a directing win, and Anora would have all of them. I also think it's important to note that in such a kind of confusing year and divided year where, the Brutalist and Emilia Pérez win at the Golden Globes, and then Conclave wins at SAG, Anora won at the most important award show, which is PGA. And it's the most important award show because it's the only group that uses a preferential ranked ballot voting system the same way the Oscars do. And I think just based on seeing these movies and hearing online chatter and reading anonymous ballots, it seems like Anora is the most kind of universally agreed upon movie that everyone likes. That and Conclave are kind of the two types of movies. Whereas a movie like Emilia Pérez, I think there are going to be a lot of people that have it number 1 on their ballot. But then there's also going to be a lot of people who just don't like the movie at all. So divisive movies don't really work well on the preferential ballot, but more unanimously agreed upon movies like Anora or Conclave do well. And Anora won at the award show that had and used the exact same system as the Oscars. I think that's important. And then just from a historical point of view, I do think Anora fits in a little bit more in line with recent winners. Conclave is a little bit more of a traditional Oscar winner. whereas Anora is maybe more of the modern Oscar winner. Let's not forget, this is the group that gave the Best Picture to Parasite over 1917, or Everything Everywhere All at Once over The Fabelmans. In the same way, I think Anora is a little bit more closely aligned with Everything Everywhere All at Once and Parasite, younger directors from independent studios, whereas movies like Fabelmans in 1917, studio movies from older established directors, a little bit more traditional in their style of storytelling. I think Conclave is a little bit more in that line, whereas Anora is a little bit more in the Parasite, Everything Everywhere kind of a mold of recent winners. So it's been a crazy year. There could be a lot of movies that ultimately win Best Picture, but my pick is going to go to Anora. Then for the Best Director category, my prediction is that the Oscar is going to go to Sean Baker for Anora. So the big reason why I predicted him is because he won the Directors Guild of America Award, the DGA Award. This is when the directors nominate and give awards to who they think are the best directors of the year. And they're a very accurate group at predicting the Oscars for Best Director. 18 out of the last 20 DGA winners also went on to win Best Director at the Oscars. That's a really strong stat in terms of Oscar stats go. And then I think about his competitor. His main competitor, I would say, is Brady Corbett for The Brutalist. He won for Best Director at BAFTA. He also won at the Golden Globe Awards. But what has kind of revealed itself over the course of these precursor awards is that The Brutalist has very little guild support. It's been nominated at a lot of places, but it hasn't won anywhere. At all the kind of major guild awards, something like SAG, Adrien Brody loses. It doesn't have a lot of nominations. PGA it lost, DGA it lost, Corbett lost to Sean Baker. It even lost at ASC, the American Society of Cinematographers, which may be a small thing, but it's the frontrunner to win in that category. Why can it not win any kind of single an industry guild award? I think it's because the movie is maybe respected but not loved, and that I think ultimately hurt Corbett's chances here. And then also, when you think about other years where the directing race has been kind of odd, I would say like Jane Campion in The Power of the Dog year, where the movie only won for Best Director. Or even other years like Alfonso Cuarón winning for Best Director for Roma. Those movies, Roma, Power of the Dog, they won somewhere at some industry prize. It would be really odd for me to say, okay, I'm going to predict Brady Corbett to win for director, when his movie hasn't really won at any industry award show. No BAFTA, no SAG, no PGA, no DGA. Even at an award show like the BAFTAs, where he won for Best Director, his movie didn't win for Best Film. So I would be very surprised, I think, actually, if Corbett were to win. I know some people think it's a lot tighter of a race just because Corbett's maybe in the mold of a more traditional winner. But based on all the kind of previous award shows, what they're telling us is they don't love this movie as much as other people think they do. And I think it would be very odd and a historical anomaly to have a Best Director winner not have their movie win at any other major industry award show. That's kind of the deal breaker for me, which is why I went with Sean Baker for Anora. Then my prediction for Best Actress, I'm going to go with Demi Moore for The Substance. This was one of the categories that I really wrestled with. Mikey Madison one day, Demi Moore the next day. I think those are the two kind of contenders. But ultimately, I thought that Demi had the best chance from a kind of a momentum point of view rather than a statistical kind of point of view. I think if you're just looking at pure stats and the trend of recent winners, Mikey Madison fits in the mold more so of that. But I do think there's kind of necessary context to be made. So the argument, I think the strongest argument that I've made in the past for Mikey Madison is that when you look at past winners, particularly within the Best Actress category, they oftentimes give the award to the actress in the more well-liked movie. Emma Stone last year wins for Poor Things over someone like Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon, because Poor Things is a stronger, more well-liked movie by the Academy than Killers of the Flower Moon, which would be the case here if what I predicted to be true. Anora wins picture and director. And yet what really kind of stopped me from doing that is by going year over year and trying to get a little bit more understanding of, yes, that is true, but what are the kind of nuances that led to those situations? Well, in 2018, Olivia Colman beat out Glenn Close. Her movie was more well-liked, but it was a huge difference. The Wife was 1 nomination. The Favorite, I think, had 10 nominations. That's a major different scenario than Anora and The Substance. Same thing in 2020, where Frances McDormand beat out Viola Davis in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, but Ma Rainey's Black Bottom wasn't nominated for Best Picture. there was a huge gap between Ma Rainey's and Nomadland in terms of what was well appreciated at the Oscars. Whereas a movie like Anora and the Substance, both of them are nominated for Best Picture, Director, Screenplay. They're competing in the major categories. They had a similar number of nominations. So I just kind of went through every single one. And the only ones that you would kind of give an argument towards as to why you would pick Mikey Madison, I think would be Frances McDormand in Nomadland. She won at BAFTA, and then because her movie won Best Picture, Frances McDormand also won. But Frances McDormand was a 2-time winner already. It was a weird year where Viola Davis won SAG, Frances McDormand won BAFTA, and I believe Carey Mulligan won at Critics' Choice. So there wasn't a clear kind of a winner with any strong narrative. We kind of thought maybe Viola Davis, but she had already just won in 2016 with Fences a few years earlier. So there wasn't a strong narrative or a strong alternative for someone to pick. I would even argue something like last year. Emma Stone wins at BAFTA, but she also won the Golden Globe. She had a speech earlier on in the year, and Lily Gladstone wasn't in as well liked of a movie, and her narrative isn't as strong as someone like Demi Moore is this year. So those are kind of the negative cases that pushed me away from Mikey Madison. And then I thought about kind of momentum and speeches and who the Academy wants to vote for. And this was a really unique year that I don't think a lot of people think about sometimes, which is that oftentimes we consider SAG and BAFTA to be really important award shows at predicting what's going to win at the Oscars, because I think genuinely Oscar voters use those two award shows to help them with their own predictions. And oftentimes those award shows happen earlier on in the year before Oscars, before the Oscar voting period occurs, and it helps influence people. But SAG was after the Oscar voting's closed, so that couldn't really affect things. Even BAFTA, the speeches that happened were in the kind of final day and a half of Oscar voting. I don't think it made a huge impact, probably a little bit of an impact. Let's say see Mikey Madison up there winning for Anora at BAFTA, but a lot of people probably had already voted before then. The period and the kind of timeline of the periods are very different than this year because of the delays due to the LA fires. So I think that ultimately affects kind of how people and Oscar voters thought about the race. And then what did we have earlier on in the season? Golden Globes and Critics' Choice. Golden Globes was really early. Critics' Choice was delayed a little bit, but still earlier than SAG and BAFTA. And Demi Moore won at both of those award shows. And she gave great speeches at both of those award shows. I think the Golden Globes was kind of an all-time speech in terms of presenting her case. She has a very clear narrative of never won before, bit of a comeback for her. She hasn't been in mainstream kind of major movies, has a starring role in a long time. The movie has this kind of meta-narrative of not wanting to kind of throw away and get rid of older actresses as soon as they hit 50. I think that's going to resonate with the American branch of the Academy. And then another kind of a wrinkle that I don't think a lot of people are considering too much is the Fernanda Torres of it all. Could she win? Absolutely. I'm Still Here is a very well-liked movie within the Academy. But Fernanda Torres, the interesting part is that this is the first time we've seen a competition directly where Fernanda Torres is directly competing with Mikey Madison or Demi Moore. She wasn't nominated at BAFTA. She wasn't nominated at SAG. So we don't know, in a way, if there was, let's say, someone who loved Fernanda Torres at BAFTA who voted for Mikey Madison, but probably would have voted for Fernanda Torres had she been nominated. So then I have to ask myself, okay, so there's going to be some people within the Academy that love Torres' performance and vote for her. And who are those voters? I think they're international voters. So I actually think in a scenario, and this is hypothetical, but in such a tight race, you can kind of do some of these mental gymnastics, which is that I think if Fernanda Torres was nominated at BAFTA, she probably could have won that award. And that Mikey Madison and Fernanda Torres have both the international branch support of the Academy. I think it's notable the fact that Anora not only, lost Mikey Madison at Best Actress at SAG, but also lost Best Ensemble at SAG. That indicated to me that there is not a strong support of the acting within Anora. There's maybe an appreciation for the movie, but not necessarily the acting, or else it probably would have won either, I think, Ensemble or Mikey Madison if that was the case. So the way I kind of look at it very plainly is Demi Moore has the American support of the Academy. Mikey Madison has the international support of the Academy. Demi won SAG, Mikey won at BAFTA. What's the larger branch? Probably the American side. And then also you have the caveat of the international branch, who I think ultimately give their support to Mikey Madison. What percentage of those people, the international members of the Academy, are also not going to vote for Mikey Madison or Demi Moore, but vote for Fernando Torres. So because of kind of vote splitting between international voters, between Mikey Madison and Fernando Torres, because of the SAG win, because of the fact that the Golden Globe speeches and the Critics' Choice Awards, I think, matter maybe a little bit more this year because of how late SAG and BAFTA were, that I don't think those speeches really impacted things. I think it gives us an overall sense that Demi Moore, with her narrative, with her movie being super well liked, with the SAG win, with the Golden Globes win, which she beat out Mikey Madison directly, with the Critics' Choice win, which she beat out Mikey Madison directly, I think Oscar voters considered her kind of the front runner to win, and I think that her narrative to win, her support of the movie generally, and the fact that the Oscars are more of a kind of legacy, give the award to someone who's never won before, it's time for them. Even in recent years, older actresses, Frances McDormand, Olivia Colman, Michelle Yeoh, they've been more willing to give it to older actresses recently rather than the ingenues that they did of the 2010s and the 2000s in particular. They've been a little bit more okay with giving it to older actresses. Substance is a still well-liked movie. Director, picture, screenplay, really well-liked. And Demi Moore has the narrative and some of the industry precursors in the case of SAG. So ultimately it was a tough decision, but felt good about Demi Moore at the end of the day. Then for Best Actor, I think Adrien Brody from The Brutalist is going to win. I outlined my case on Monday's video, but essentially Timothée Chalamet just won at SAG. That may sway some people to predict him. Ultimately, though, I think the reason why he won there is because his movie, A Complete Unknown, was really well liked, and The Brutalist wasn't well liked at SAG. A Complete Unknown had 4 total nominations. The Brutalist had 1. There was a clear support for actors of A Complete Unknown that there wasn't with The Brutalist. Now, will that impact the Oscars? Maybe, but let's look at the nominations. At that SAG, A Complete Unknown had 4 times more nominations than The Brutalist. At the Oscars, The Brutalist has more nominations than A Complete Unknown. The acting branches of the Academy liked The Brutalist so much that they nominated both Guy Pearce and Felicity Jones in the supporting acting categories at the Oscars, even though they didn't get nominations at SAG, just to show you some differences between the acting branches even within the Academy. Then you have the more general support of The Brutalist in the below-the-line categories, which A Complete Unknown also has, but I think The Brutalist has more support, given the fact that it has 10 nominations to A Complete Unknown's 8. And keep in mind that everyone votes for the Oscars in terms of the winners. So it's not just actors thinking who's going to be the best actor. It's the cinematographer who's going to vote for, Adrien Brody just because he really liked The Brutalist. And this category, historically and recently, go with the older actor over the younger actor. They go with Brendan Fraser over Austin Butler. They go with Anthony Hopkins over Chadwick Boseman. As a matter of fact, in the 21st century, there have only been 2. Only 2 winners under the age of 35. Timothée Chalamet is not only under the age of 35, he is under the age of 30. He would be the youngest ever winner to win in the Best Lead Actor category. The speech, which I thought was a good speech, happened after voting period ended, so it's not going to impact anything positive or negatively. I think The Brutalist is more well-liked of a movie as A Complete Unknown. Adrien Brody is a little bit of an older actor, therefore I think they're going to want to be a little bit more inclined to reward him. And it is also a very involved performance, just like Chalamet's is with Bob Dylan, where he's in every part of that movie. And kind of like a Cillian Murphy type of performance last year, it reminds me a lot of that, a very involving 3-hour-plus epic biopic light, even though it's not based on a real person. Adrien Brody kind of embodies that Laszlo Toth character, and I do think after winning at BAFTA as well, and Critics' Choice and Golden Globes, beating out Chalamet, when the Oscar voting period happened, Brody was kind of the clear frontrunner to win, and I thought that Chalamet would win at SAG for a long time just because of the style of performance and how much they liked that movie. I think that's a little bit more of a blip, a little bit more of a SAG-specific thing. I do think I'm pretty confident that Brody actually will win at the Oscars. Then Best Supporting Actress, I went with Zoe Saldana for Emilia Pérez. Keep this one relatively brief. She's won everywhere. The question about her win was ultimately because Emilia Pérez, the movie, suffered a bit of a controversy a couple of weeks ago during the Oscar voting period, where its lead, Carlos Sofia Gascon, had some kind of questionably tweets that she tweeted out that were perceived as racist or Islamophobic, and that's something that I think ultimately hurt the movie's chances, and that there's some people that, because of its stars kind of past and statements that she's made, don't feel comfortable voting for the movie. So the question then becomes, okay, well, there's been a change from nominations period to nomination kind of Oscar night. How will that affect the movie? And it hasn't affected Zoe Saldana. She won at SAG, she won at BAFTA. Both of those award shows voting periods were during the controversy, so it's not like there was any delays. People who were voting for Zoe Saldana still knew about the controversy at the time, and they still voted for Zoe Saldana. So I think that's a great testament to the fact that it's not her that she's at the center of the controversy, it's one of her co-stars. She's never won before. She's worked for a long time in mainstream movies and also independent movies. She's had some great speeches, seems very kind of appreciative of it. And like I said, has won every precursor, so it'd be a little bit silly to not choose her. The only question would be, well, how much of the controversy would affect her, and it didn't affect her at BAFTA and didn't affect her at SAG. That's enough for me to go for her there. Then for Best Supporting Actor, I think the Oscar is going to go to Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. Similar situation here with Zoe Saldana, where Kieran has won every major precursor, non-industry awards like Golden Globes and Critics' Choice, and then industry awards like SAG, like BAFTA. Gave some really great speeches over the course of the year, and you can really tell how kind of charming he can be in person, which he has done particularly earlier on in the season with some of his campaigning. It always helps to be kind of a co-lead in your movie for the supporting actor categories, because when you think of the movie, you think about the actor. So he's won everywhere. He's like Zoe Saldana, where he's won everywhere but doesn't have the controversy, and is also not in a Best Picture nominee, but a movie that got in for original screenplay and even won at BAFTA. So I do think it's a well-liked movie generally, and you could probably say it was in the 11th or 12th spot for Best Picture anyways. Then for Best Original Screenplay, I think the Oscar is going to go to Anora. I don't want to overthink this. I think a lot of people are overthinking things just because of a BAFTA win, because Anora is not as strong in this screenplay category as some maybe had hoped. But the fact is that this movie, I think, is going to win Best Picture. And based on my predictions, it'd be very odd for, I think, to win Best Picture and then Best Director, and then that's it. That's a weird kind of a combination, particularly when you're comparing some of the kind of competition in this category, which I don't think is very strong. You have a movie like A Real Pain, which did win at BAFTA, yes, but wasn't nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. Kind of was snubbed a bit there, and I don't think has overall support within the Academy, particularly, and not enough support, I think, to win out in this category over a potential Best Picture winner in the case of Anora, particularly when the last time a screenplay won in this category, where the movie was not nominated for Best Picture, was all the way back in 2004 with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and that was still when the Oscars had only 5 nominees for Best Picture. That year, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind probably would have gotten in if it was an expanded lineup of 10. I just don't see the support for A Real Pain to beat out the maybe potential Best Picture winner in the case of Anora. And then The Substance being another contender, which has an originality of its kind of the screenplay, of the idea of it, but lost at BAFTA, wasn't eligible at WGA, did win a Critics' Choice, but that's not an industry award, so you don't want to kind of give that too much credit. And it's doing the same thing. It's going up against a movie like Anora, which I think it could win for Best Picture. And if you have it winning for Best Picture, 7 of the last 10 winners for Best Picture also won in one of the screenplay categories, and the ones that didn't, let's say The Shape of Water, they were never competitive in their screenplay categories. They were kind of a directing technical achievement type of movies. Anora is a screenplay directing kind of a movie. I think it's going to have a similar path to a movie like Parasite. Then for Best Adapted Screenplay, I think the winner is going to go to Conclave. This is a movie that clearly is peaking late, winning for Best Film at BAFTA, winning for Best Ensemble at SAG. It's a potential winner for Best Picture. So, like we mentioned with Anora, if Conclave ends up doing and it wins Best Picture, well, it's going to be based on the fact that it has a guaranteed kind of screenplay prize here with Conclave, and it's won in a bunch of important places. BAFTA, most recently, wasn't eligible at WGA, so it losing there, wasn't even nominated because it wasn't eligible, so not worried about that. And even won at the Golden Globes in their screenplay category, beating out some of the original nominees like Anora. So I think it's a well-liked movie. Its screenplay is its kind of a strength, because it's kind of the plot twists and twisty-turny and the drama and the tension of it all. I'd be very shocked if Conclave doesn't win this prize. Whether it wins Best Picture or not, I don't think that matters. Conclave is winning in Adapted Screenplay. Then for Best Cinematography, I think the Oscar is going to go to The Brutalist. This is a movie with its emphasis being the kind of framing, the visuals, the 70 millimeter presentation of it all, very iconic images throughout the movie. And it won at the British Society of Cinematographers Guild. It also won at BAFTA. Usually the kind of main three that you look for the cinematography category here is the winners of BSC, ASC, and BAFTA. It's won 2 out of the 3, so that's some good signs for it. And the movie it lost to at ASC was Maria, which is from legendary cinematographer Ed Lachman. Bit of a career achievement for him, and almost a good thing for The Brutalist, because a movie like Maria wasn't well liked within the Academy, wasn't nominated for costume design, wasn't nominated for Angelina Jolie. And because the Oscars, everyone votes on the winners, I'd be very surprised if Ed Lachman wins here, because I don't think anyone has seen Maria versus a movie like The Brutalist, which I think most Academy members have seen, given it got 10 nominations. So it would make sense if the cinematographers, the American cinematographers, want to reward an established legendary cinematographer in Ed Lachman, but the more general overall public of the Academy will vote for the movie they like more, with interesting visuals, that also won at BAFTA, that also won at BSC. The Brutalist, I think, is pretty comfortable to win here. Then for Best Costume Design, I went with Wicked. This is a lock to win on the Oscar night. I mentioned it in my kind of Oscar locks video a couple of months ago now, and won since then at the Costume Designers Guild, won at BAFTA. They've been going with fantasy movies more recently. It's a slam dunk to win. For Best Production Design, I also think the Oscar is going to go to Wicked. This is a movie that I wasn't super confident in to win earlier on in the season, but has no kind of number 2 competitors. The Brutalist lost at the Art Directors Guild Awards, also lost at BAFTA. Wicked won in the fantasy category at the Art Directors Guild Awards, also won at BAFTA. I think the fact that it's number 2, which was The Brutalist, lost at the Art Directors Guild is notable. It even lost at the Set Decorator Society Guild, so I guess the number 2 right now would be maybe something like Nosferatu, because that won period at Art Directors Guild, but Wicked is from Nathan Crowley, who's a 7-time nominee, well-respected, worked on the Nolan movies, and has won all the kind of major precursors that it needed to from a well-respected production designer. I'd be surprised if Wicked doesn't win. Then for Best Animated Film, I'm predicting The Wild Robot to win for the Oscar. This category has been tough to predict in recent years. Some years they go with the American movie, some years they go with the more international movie. But this year I think there's actually potentially 2 international movies that are kind of stealing each other's thunder, which is why I went with the kind of more mainstream American movie. When they don't go with the American movie, let's say like last year with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, is because the Academy in particular is against, I think, sequels. They don't really like to reward sequels, which is why, How to Train Your Dragon loses all those years ago. I think that was the big Hero 6 year, or even the Brave surprise year. They like kind of the more original type movies. The Wild Robot is an original movie, very high approval rating, just like a movie like Flow. Ultimately, I think it comes down to The Wild Robot or Flow, but I do think Flow, which will have more of the international members of the Academy, was nominated for Best International Feature. I think there'll be more support on that side, whereas the American members of the Academy will just want to reward the movie that they probably saw, which is most likely The Wild Robot, being a mainstream Hollywood DreamWorks production. And Flow, I think, is competing with Wallace and Gromit, in which, if that movie hadn't been released, maybe there was some English members of the Academy that would have voted for Flow, and that would have put it over the edge. But I think that there's going to be just some support for that movie, Wallace and Gromit, given the fact that it won Best Animated Feature at BAFTA. So Flow doesn't have any industry awards. It has Critics Awards, it has the Golden Globes, but The Wild Robot and Wallace and Gromit have the industry awards. And The Wild Robot has the most industry awards in an Annie's win and a PGA Best Animated Film win. And I think that usually they go with the more kind of traditional Hollywood mainstream movie, The Wild Robot being that, and also being the most well-received, with a little bit of precursor wins. I think it's ultimately going to go to The Wild Robot. Then for Best Editing, I think the Oscars are going to go to Conclave. This was a bit of a tough category to predict, but when I kind of thought about things and went through my stats and went through my process I was pretty confident at the end of the day that it is going to go to Conclave, and I don't think it's going to be that close. There could be maybe a huge surprise if Wicked or Emilia Pérez wins. That wouldn't shock me too much because Conclave isn't a solid winner. But if we're comparing the kind of two frontrunners in my mind, which would either be Conclave or Anora, Conclave wins by a mile. The only reason Anora would win here would be that it kind of sweeps at the Oscars, and it wins 5 Oscars, and it wins Screenplay, Director, Actress, Picture, and then picks up editing too, because why not? We love this movie so much. But even in years when you have kind of above the line sweeps, like the Parasite year, winning for director, screenplay, and picture, it didn't win in editing. I think there's going to be a similar path here with Anora. And that's just because when the Oscars and the Academy members think of editing, they think of it not as the movie they like the most, but with the most editing or the most flashy editing. We don't have a movie like that, let's say, like a Mad Max Fury Road or an Everything Everywhere All at Once with kind of intense flashy editing. But of the two, Anora and Conclave, we've seen winners like Conclave, and we haven't seen winners like Anora. Comedies don't win in this category. Long edited scenes don't really win in this category. What wins in this category are either in-your-face action movies or tense dramas. Well, Conclave is a tense drama. Conclave is like winners, I would say, like Argo or Whiplash. Even though Whiplash has some music to it, it is kind of more of a tense drama. Even something like Sound of Metal is maybe closer to Conclave. They're both dramas in the same way that, Anora, I would even consider more so a comedy than a drama. So the more I thought about things, the more I thought Conclave is the more traditional winner. It also won at BAFTA, so you have a little bit of precursors. We don't have the editing guild of the Ace Eddies. That happens after the Oscars, so we won't be able to judge that. But I think the support of Conclave is real more generally as a film, so it has that, just as Anora has that. And then it is a little bit more of the traditional winner, more montages, tighter runtime, entertaining twists and turns, thrilling kind of a movie like an Argo. Whereas Anora, there hasn't really been a winner like that. And the most recent example, I think, would be like Parasite, and that didn't win in this category. So that's just something to keep in mind. Best documentary, I think the Oscar is going to go to Porcelain War. So I've been a little bit more standard and chalk with my picks so far. So there's always surprises on the Oscars. I wanted to go with a surprise, a calculated surprise, and I thought this category was kind of ripe for an upset. So ultimately I went with Porcelain War. I think a lot of people, they're a front runner, and I've seen a lot of people predict No Other Land, but I have a lot of concerns with that movie. And in part, it's because, first of all, it doesn't have any distribution, so I'm not sure how much of a campaign has been done to actually get the movie seen in front of people. And it's just hard to see generally, so it's not like you're booting up Netflix like you do every single night at home, and you see the movie there. It's kind of hard to see. The buzz isn't as strong, I think, as people would like to say within the Academy, maybe more so online and word of mouth that way, but not necessarily within the Academy in terms of there's a reason why Netflix got Emilia Pérez 13 nominations, and they have a bunch of nominations every year because they spend a lot on campaigning. They're in their faces. No Other Land doesn't really have that. And my other concern is that No Other Land, from people who have seen it, I haven't seen it myself, but is, I think, described as kind of a pro-Palestine type of a movie. And the conflict between Palestine and Israel is a very controversial topic within the Academy. How do we know that? Well, just last year, Jonathan Glazer had a speech when he won for the Zone of Interest, talking about the kind of conflict there in Palestine. And people were so offended that they wrote out a petition kind of denouncing him and his words at the telecast. So clearly, that tells me that there are some people within the Academy that just aren't going to vote for this movie. Another kind of small thing that makes me concerned about No Other Land winning is there was a live action short that I predicted to get nominated called An Orange from Jaffa, which isn't directly about the conflict, but is set in that region of the world. They didn't nominate that. So that indicates to me that there's a little bit of kind of concern about whether or not movies from and with this kind of a topic will get nominated. So I'm not saying that there's not people who are pro-Palestine or not within the Academy. What I am saying is I think it's a controversial issue. And I think there's going to be some people that aren't going to vote for this movie because of that. And it's not like it's a far and away winner. Wasn't nominated at PGA, wasn't nominated at DGA, lost at BAFTA to Super/Man, which isn't even nominated at the Oscars. So it hasn't really won anywhere. And the only movie that has won is Porcelain War. It won at DGAs, and of these 5 documentary nominations, it was the only movie to also have been nominated at PGA. So more general support. It got a PGA nomination and it got a DGA win. Those are industry awards that we have signs to point towards. Now, it wasn't nominated at BAFTA. I think that's somewhat notable, but we don't have anything to compare it to because it's kind of an odd year where Super Slash Man was winning in every category at all the other industry awards. Porcelain War at least won DGA. And then I think about the other nominees. Okay, is it going to go to Black Box Diaries? That's won nowhere, lost at BAFTA, although it was nominated. Sugarcane wasn't even nominated at BAFTA, even though it has some kind of critic support. Soundtrack to Coup d'etat wasn't nominated at BAFTA, wasn't nominated at PGA. So I think at the end of the day, we're left with Porcelain War, the only movie of this bunch that has actually won an industry award, a movie that is politically relevant. The last 2 winners have been in some way directly connected to kind of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, or about Russia indirectly, Navalny, and then 20 Days in Mariupol. So who's to say that this Academy is not going to vote for a political movie, which they like to do, but a political movie with less controversy in the case of Porcelain War, which is about the kind of Russia-Ukraine conflict rather than the Israel-Palestine conflict that No Other Land kind of portrays. It's a bit of a not a guarantee pick. I think this category is ripe for upset. I don't feel like No Other Land is a strong contender. So then I go, okay, let's make a calculated risk. Let's calculate what the upside is in terms of what a potential upset is. And it led me to one movie, that movie being Porcelain War. Then for Best Score, I think the Oscar is going to go to The Brutalist. The movie won at BAFTA. It won at the Society of Composers and Song Lyricists in the Independent Feature category. I actually think the number 2 in this category will probably be The Wild Robot, because that movie beat out Conclave in their studio category. And I think it's notable that Conclave won Best Film at BAFTA and won Screenplay and was well liked at that award show, won editing, but didn't win for Best Score. So I don't think Conclave is a serious contender for score. The fact that I think The Brutalist won there is an indicative sign of its support. And then you have the Guild on the American side, which it was competing in independent category, so it's hard to compete directly, but it still won in that category. It has a very noticeable score, booming, in your face, which I think will appeal to a larger kind of members of the Academy. It's the most noticeable of the scores, and not kind of concerned that it won't win. I think it's pretty likely that The Brutalist here is going to win for score. Then for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, I think the Oscar is going to go to The Substance. It has won a bunch of these industry awards, one at BAFTA, one at the Makeup and Hairstyling Guild, the multiple awards there. And it's also a traditional type of a winner. 4 out of the last 7 winners of this category also had an acting person from their movie win. Most of the time, it's the person who is in a lot of the prosthetics. So, Darkest Hour will win in this category. And then Gary Oldman, for being transformed into Winston Churchill, will win for Best Actor. That's notable. And then even still, I mentioned 4 of the last 7 winners in this category had their actor win the Oscar. But even the last 7 generally had at least one performance from their movie nominated for an acting category. So that's notable. So whoever's going to win this category, they need to have one of their movies nominated for acting. What are those movies? Wicked, Emilia Pérez, and The Substance. Emilia Pérez, the acting win is going to go to Zoe Saldana, who doesn't have any real kind of prosthetics in the movie. That's not really the transformation that people are impressed by from that movie, not the makeup job that people are impressed by. Wicked does have makeup in an acting potential winner in Cynthia Erivo, but she's not as strong as I would say Demi Moore, who I am predicting to win for Best Actress. Substance has the kind of industry support, has the precursor wins, has the potential acting win in Demi Moore, and at the very least has that acting nomination, and is prosthetic forward and more of a transformation, more than just the green skin of Cynthia Erivo. Then for Best Sound, I think the Oscar is going to go to Dune Part 2. This is a category that I'm not super confident in, even though Dune has won a lot of the precursors. I'm a little bit skeptical of it because, first of all, the Zone of Interest kind of surprised last year, and that's left me a little bit nervous. And this is a relatively newer category, where before we had sound editing and sound mixing, now we just have one category, Best Sound. And the precursors aren't unanimous to Dune Part 2. The Cinematography Society went to a complete unknown. But BAFTA and MPSE, the Motion Picture Sound Editors Guild, did go to Dune Part 2, which is why I lean there, just because it has 2 industry awards. The last Dune movie won. They usually go with more action-type movies rather than music-type movies. So a movie like Top Gun Maverick will beat out a movie like Elvis, not the music-based movie, the more the action, louder movie, which if we're comparing Dune to A Complete Unknown, Dune is more of that kind of an action-y, sound-forward movie. And the argument also for it is that A Complete Unknown won at the Cinema Audio Society, which is a music-based movie, and the other kind of competitor for Dune in this category would be Wicked, a musical. So you could say the kind of people who appreciate the music sound editing of this movie, think of A Complete Unknown, think of Wicked, and they kind of cancel each other out. And the people who like kind of more action effects rather than music mixing will want to vote for Dune Part 2. And ultimately, I think that's where things are going to end. But if there's a sneaky surprise, I wouldn't be shocked at all if it was A Complete Unknown. If you want to make a kind of surprise prediction on one of these technical categories, A Complete Unknown, I think, is not been given enough credit or in terms of other predictions and other people who have predicted things. But, it was a really tough decision between that or Dune Part 2. Wanted to go with the safe pick, wanted to go with Dune Part 2. Then for Best Original Song, I think the Oscar is going to go to El Mal from Emilia Pérez. The question with Emilia Pérez, and we mentioned it earlier, which is based on nominations and now how much has it kind of decreased in terms of overall appreciation due to the controversy. We'll talk about it a little bit later in the next category, International Feature. But I don't think that this will affect this song category here for many reasons. First of all, this song is connected to Zoe Saldana. Zoe Saldana sings kind of the first part, the rap part of it. It's kind of her song in the movie. And we know that Zoe Saldana has been appreciated. She won at SAG and BAFTA despite the controversy. El Mal is also a song that won at Golden Globes and won at Critics' Choice Awards and won at BAFTA. So it's been winning at all the major precursors, so it should easily win based on that. Regardless of the controversy, I don't think people are going to go, I don't like the lead of this movie, therefore I'm not going to nominate the song. And then you think of this competition, it's competing against itself in Mi Camino, it's competing against Sing Sing, a song from an Elton John documentary, and a song from a Netflix movie no one's seen from 16 or 17-time loser Diane Warren. So there's not a strong competition. None of those movies are nominated for Best Picture. None of them have as many nominations as Emilia Pérez does. I think that the song's connection to Zoe Saldana and appreciation generally for the movie, the only kind of original musical nominated here, should win. Also notable that the last time a movie had 2 songs from the same movie nominated in this category and didn't win was all the way back in 2003 with Cold Mountain. If you have multiple songs from the same movie nominated in this category, oftentimes you win in this category. Then for Best International Film, I think the Oscar is going to go to Emilia Pérez. Unfortunately, despite some of the kind of fans of Fernando Torres who comment on a lot of my videos, I still think it's going to go to Emilia Pérez, in part because I don't think that the controversy has hurt it as much as maybe people want to believe or hope to believe. I think that the question you have to ask yourself is, on Oscar nominations morning, I was pretty convinced Emilia Pérez was going to win. Why? Because it had the same number of nominations as I'm Still Here and 10 more, and nominated for screenplay and director and multiple acting nominations. It was just a more well-liked movie. So when you're talking about more well-liked movie, Emilia Pérez or I'm Still Here, I think the answer was obvious. So if no controversy happened, we would all be easily predicting Emilia Pérez. The only reason why we are predicting potentially I'm Still Here is because in the time between nominations and Oscar night, or when Oscar voting period closes, there was, I think, probably a decrease in appreciation for Emilia Pérez and an increase in more people watching I'm Still Here and probably liking I'm Still Here. So the question then becomes, did enough people watch I'm Still Here and like it, and enough people dislike Emilia Pérez for I'm Still Here to be even more well appreciated than Emilia Pérez? I think that's too large of a gap to bridge in such a short period of time. I don't think this was a situation where Emilia Pérez had 4 nominations and I'm Still Here had 3, and they were both pretty similar in Oscar nominations, and then the controversy happens, and then it's going to go to I'm Still Here. I think of it as Emilia Pérez was up here, 13 nominations, I'm Still Here, 3 nominations. Emilia Pérez is still a more well-liked movie, regardless of the controversy, and has been winning at every kind of precursor in BAFTA or Golden Globes or what have you. It is the kind of seen as the most appreciated by many different branches of the Academy. There could be a huge backlash to the movie, but I'm not sure how relevant that is in the Academy and how much of an online thing it is. So ultimately, I think I'm going to go with and stick with Emilia Pérez. Best visual effects, I went with Dune Part 2. This should be an easy lock on the night. It did not win at the Visual Effects Society. That went to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. However, once you learn the fact that the Visual Effects Society has awarded every single Planet of the Apes movies, all the 3 earlier ones with Caesar, the fact that they gave all those movies the main prize at VES, and then none of those movies went on to win the Oscars, tells me everything I need to know. It tells me that when you're looking at this category, don't look at the Visual Effects Society, because they're a little bit more insular. They're going to nominate certain things, versus the larger Academy. They're probably going to vote for the movie that is nominated for Best Picture. As a matter of fact, you have to go back to 2014 to look at a Best Visual Effects winner here that was not nominated for Best Picture. Most of the time, if you're nominated for Best Picture, you're winning in this category. Even the years when you have no Best Picture nominees, the movie that seems like the most Best Picture like A First Man beating out Avengers Infinity War, they still win. Or Interstellar winning in 2014, or Blade Runner 2049 winning in 2017. The most with other nominations, or the most likely to get nominated for Best Picture, also wins the Visual Effects Award. But this year we have 2 movies nominated for Best Picture nominated here. Wicked and Dune Part 2. The difference, Dune Part 2 won at BAFTA, and the first movie won, and Wicked had minimal nominations at the Visual Effects Society. And I think Dune, its kind of world building was a little bit more well blended, which is a little bit more their style. They don't like as many kind of talking characters. They like a little bit more blended effects, which is why, for example, they go with First Man over an Avengers Infinity War. They'll go with kind of realistic VFX, set extensions over something like a main purple character in Thanos. So I don't know if they're going to go with Wicked, which has these talking animals, versus a movie like Dune, which they also like, which was also nominated for Best Picture, which has a little bit more of their style of integrated VFX. Now on to the shorts, our final 3 we're predicting here. We'll be brief with this just because there's not a lot of analysis you can use for this, just based on what I've seen of the shorts and my own analysis. So for Best Animated Short, I think the Oscar is going to go to Wander to Wonder. This is a movie that won Best Animated Short at BAFTA, also won at the Annies, so it has a little bit of precursor support, which I like. It's a very weird short. It's not as cute as some of the other ones like Yuck or Magic Candies, but I think that it helps it stand out. So you have some precursor wins. You have some unique animation style that people I think will remember. I think it's going to go to Wander to Wonder. Best documentary short, I went with The Only Girl in the Orchestra. Everyone has their kind of rules for these categories. Some people like to pick the one with the weird title or the movie that they like the least. But for me, what I like to do is, when I think about people who vote on the Oscars, oftentimes for the shorts, they watch them all at once. The Academy has screenings set up where you can watch all of them back to back to back. So what I try to look at is take a look at watch as many shorts as I can, or read up as many shorts as are available to me. And then I go, what is the movie that is the least like the other nominees? So that when you're watching them all at once, you don't get them kind of confused because there's an obvious one that is completely different than the other ones. This year, that is The Only Girl in the Orchestra. It reminds me of, I think it was 2018 when Period End of Sentence won. That won because it was a Netflix movie, so it was easy to see, and all the other movies were kind of political or depressing. That's the same situation here. A lot of these other nominees are very dark and political, and The Only Girl in the Orchestra is uplifting. And it's available on Netflix, so it's easy to see, so there's a likelihood that some people will vote in this category because it's the only short film that they've seen. So I do think, pretty confident actually, as much as you can be in a short category for The Only Girl in the Orchestra. And then for Best Live Action Short, I went with Alien, or Alien. It's a very thinly veiled metaphor for immigration and kind of ICE and some of the debates and topics in the news right now. Feels very timely. It's the only one of the shorts that are in English, which I think will make sure it has more larger appeal. Less confident about this one, but I'm betting on the fact that it's timely, it's relevant, has a unique name, and it's in English. And I don't remember the last time a non-English film won in this category. It's been a lot of kind of English-based shorts, so I do think that's notable. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please comment below and let me know your predictions for the 2025 Oscars. Thanks for coming along for another season of Old Oscar Countdown. We're not going to go anywhere. We're still going to make videos starting on Monday after the Oscars and continuing throughout the whole summer season. And we're actually going to be doing a series about the Oscars and kind of related to it. So I hope you stick around for that. But if not, we'll see you next year for season 10 of Old Oscar Countdown. But until next time, stay tuned.